Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, verses 83 to 87 will be covered today. What is Ruh? The Quranic perspective. There are a couple of other aspects as well, but I thought this is the main focus of today's presentation. So let us keep it in the title. These are the references. Over here, I've added the human self and Iblis as well. I think there is a lot covered in that book on Ruh and Iblis and Shaitan, and also on Wahi and the need for Wahi. There is a very good chapter on that. It's worth going through it again. This is our contact in case there is any query or question regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentations. Recap verses 78 to 82. In order to establish the system of Deen, a methodical procedure needs to be followed, which requires a very high understanding of the Quran as guidance. Without understanding it as a system, and this is what to establish Salat means. If we remember, we went through this aspect of Salat, that Salat is not merely the name of doing the ritualized prayers, but it is far more, and it is, the Quran points to a system. Merely reading it or reciting it will not lead to any change in the outer world. And we can see that it is evidence-based fact that rituals do not change the world. We have to change our thinking, and then in the practical world outside, we have to change the things. We have to control the events which are taking place around us. We have to manage those events. To enhance this understanding, continuous effort is required both individually as well as by coming together. If necessary, then studying and analyzing the various issues in the early morning and also during a part of the night helps. All this needs to be pursued with one aim and the motivation that you wish to replace the existing man-made system with the system of Deen as defined by the Quran. So some of the aspects which we covered, actually we need to practice them in order to get the evidence of it. For example, doing things early in the morning, if we are contemplating on some important issue of our life, then we will see that early in the morning we are in a better position to think through it. For this, continuously desire that no step is taken which is not in line with the defined path. After pursuing this path, as noted here, a stage will definitely arrive when it will become clearly evident that Batil is bound to be replaced by Al-Haq. This is bound to happen just as darkness vanishes when light dawns. So it is like a path. If we do not follow this path, then we cannot get this evidence to which the Quran is pointing our attention repeatedly. The whole purpose of sending down guidance through the Quran is that those among mankind who are dissatisfied with the man-made systems can establish the system of Deen by following its guidance. And this is what La ilaha means, that we have to reject all gods which occupy our psyche, our mind, and get rid of them, and then say that I do not accept all those gods of man-made systems, and I go towards one Allah and His book, the Quran. This is a complete code of life which guides the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen in the establishment of Al-Haq, the system of Salat, in short, well-defined and measured steps, and marks the path with tangible signs. And this is an interesting part of following this guidance, and we have seen it, that you can approach it piecemeal in a short steps. Don't have to take a big leap and then do nothing. Those who do not acquire conviction in this path defined by Allah, for them there is only loss in this life and nothing in the hereafter. And this is an important statement with which this slide is ended, because unless we develop that self, we acquire that self first and then develop that self which is required for the system of Deen, there is no possibility of having a life in the hereafter which is defined by the Quran. An overview of today's presentation. When man does not understand the guidance of Wahi, his conduct is very impulsive. When he enjoys the favors of physical life, he tends to become very remote from the need for guidance, and when he suffers a loss due to the man-made systems, he falls into despair. One has to fall into despair if our mind is not following the path of the Quran. because there is nothing in our mind which is going to guide us onto the right path. And in the absence of guidance, we are lost in our life. This is the state of affairs under the man-made systems where chains become imposed on human beings either through the wrong system itself or through wrong belief systems. Instead of questioning the purpose of life and looking for guidance to get rid of these chains, man remains contented with the limited freedom he gets under man-devised systems to live his life. Because we start thinking that what we are finding around us, that is the man-made system, this is a fact of life, this is the reality, and we cannot change it. There cannot be anything better than this. Only through the guidance of the Quran can man acquire that freedom which he deserves within the limits defined by the permanent values. Only the laws of Allah as external criteria can provide guidance towards that freedom which is meant to be enjoyed by each human being in this life. Next is Ruh is through the Amr of Rabb. And Amr over here means direction, and we will put some light on this aspect. And is the Wahi of Allah sent to mankind via the Quran. Its reality and form is beyond the reach of man, but its content and teaching can be understood by every human being. And that is what matters, that what is its use, how should we understand it and get the maximum out of this understanding. Now let us go to the first verse of today's presentation. Unguided selves quickly fall in despair. وَإِذَا أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ أَعْرَضَ وَنَأَى بِجَانِبِهِ وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ كَانَ يَئُوسًا. But this matter cannot be comprehended by those people whose aim is only the benefits of physical life, and who at this point in time are in possession of wealth and prosperities. The individual whose aim of life is only this, his state is such that when he has abundances of the bounties of Allah, that is the means of sustenance, then he transgresses haqq and avoids the right path. And when trouble visits him and that wealth and those possessions are snatched from him, and these are because of the wrong system, then since there is no lofty purpose other than this before him, hence despair engulfs him. A very important aspect of impulsiveness of human thought process and psyche is pointed over here, and let us look at some further reflections. An important weakness of the human character is highlighted in this verse, for which there is plenty of evidence under the man-made systems. Many issues covered under psychiatry and psychology point to these imbalances created in human thoughts due to the absence of a higher purpose of life. Very important. If we do not have a higher purpose of life, then with each passing day, we are getting closer to our death, and subconsciously we know that we are losing days, and that also creates problems. The man-made system adds to these problems by turning man into a machine meant to live life solely in pursuit of material success. And if we are pursuing only this, then where is life in it? Because all these material things don't have life. Life comes through values, and that is the permanent values. When all these are achieved, what next? And this is also a problem with people who gather too much wealth and deprive others, and they then start suffering from these effects without even knowing about it, that why are they suffering. If we live our lives solely for the achievement of material success and never ever think about the higher purpose which involves the development of ourselves, then we have essentially tried to meet the needs of our physical potentials. But what about the latent potentials related to, for example, the permanent values kept within our psyche? By leaving these unattended and unaddressed, are these going to create any issues in the way we view our life? Another important point we should keep in mind is that even if the rich are suffering as per this verse, it does not mean that we should not do anything, because the ultimate aim is to establish the system of deen so that nobody suffers. Human beings at least understand what is the purpose of their life, and given a choice that life can go beyond death if they develop their self on the lines which are defined by the Quran. Here in the verse, the Quran has first stated that وَإِذَا أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ أَعْرَضَ وَنَأَى بِجَانِبِهِ. When we bestow our ni'mah on man, he turns away and becomes remote. And nema over here means all favors, bounties, whatever we are getting to live our life and which meet our needs will form under this nema. Note the Quran has related these bounties of life to Allah. Next slide, reflect on events through the Quranic lens. All these bounties of life are acquired by man by making use of his own intellect and physical efforts, in some cases using trickeries within the man-made system. And we observe that in a man-made system, everything is glaringly obvious to us, that what human beings do to get benefits directed towards them and deprive others. And he never relates these to Allah or a higher self, as he is not aware of the presence of his own self. Without acknowledging the presence of his own self within him, how can he engage in the aspect of self-development and a higher purpose of life, which includes the benefit of the whole of mankind? Now, this is an important comment here, that we can't just move away and leave things to people when the Quran has very clearly defined Sirat-e-Mustaqim. So our job is to understand these things, and that is why we have put these slides together and we are sharing these, that what we can do, we should keep doing. And while we are doing it, we should also observe what is going on in the world around us. The Quran here has shown attention to this aspect. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. And be you not like them who forgot Allah, and I put it under inverted commas because forgetting Allah means nothing. What it means is that we have essentially forgot our own self, that we also have a self which needs development, and for that we need the attributes of Allah and the permanent values to develop it. And He made them forget their own selves. In this verse, our attention is also drawn to this aspect, that do not create your own systems of life which are based on speculations and uncertainty, where one day one is very rich and the next day he loses all. And even if one does not lose, he suffers from underlying fear of losing all. And this is going on in the world. That is why we got these wars and conflicts. In gambling, or by knowingly taking risks in stocks, etc., or through currency fluctuations, or due to the collapse of businesses due to sudden changes of government rules. And we can see these bankruptcies, which are quite frequent in different parts of the world. For example, businesses suffered badly during the COVID-19 crisis across the world. Next is relating this to human self-development. We can see that the world created by an undeveloped self will be full of fear, huzn, and uncertainty. Hence the need for Quranic guidance. And this is a very important aspect for us to continuously observe, that what do we expect from people whose self is not developed, who have unguided minds. And this is the kind of world they will create. And that should motivate us that I'm not going to give up on this path. I will keep striving on this path till the time I leave this life. Few more elaborations. We covered under the concept of Iblis and Shaitan that human emotions, desires, and intellect simply cannot create a system which can be free from conflicts, chaos, bloodshed, exploitation, abuse, and all kinds of physical and cognitive chains. The solution presented there is very simple. Inna ibadi laisa laka alayhim sultanun wa kafa bi rabbika wakila. The meaning of this verse is, there will be no effect of all this, that is shaitanat and iblisiyat, on those who follow the guidance of Rabb, and which will lead them to rububiyat. We went through this verse in detail in one of our previous presentations. The second part of the verse points to the Iblisi side of failures and disappointments suffered under man-made systems by stating, وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ كَانَ يَئُوسًا. And Yausa means becoming hopeless and getting into despair. Some people may not show their hopelessness and despair unless we probe it, unless we ask them. When the shar of this Iblisi system, which flies all around, gets hold of someone who has no knowledge of the system of deen, he's bound to become hopeless and fall into despair. Because one of the advantages of following this path is, that is of deen, that even if the system is not established, all until the time it is established, we at least know that our direction is right, number one. Number two, we have the support of Allah's laws. And number three, that there is a hope in it. And we know that as we progress, our self becomes strengthened with every passing day, with every passing week, month, and year. And that becomes an evidence to ourselves that we should not give up and we are not going to suffer from despair. And in another verse, it says, وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ فَذُو دُعَاءٍ أَرِيدٍ. Supplication is also added, for example, if people are religious. Secular people, I don't think they supplicate to God. They may find God through this path when they suffer. And there are examples for that, but that is the God of religion. But over here, Quran says that they also start praying and start following that when they get into trouble. And when the trouble is over, they forget everything. Living in a contaminated environment and expecting to remain free from disease is not a wise strategy. And this is an important comment over here, that we live in a world which is bound to create despair and hopelessness, which is meant to create, because this is what Iblis and Shaitanat mentality does. So we shouldn't get a surprise for that. But at the same time, we do not give up our own path, our own line of thinking. The Quran invites us to diagnose the problems and ailments of the man-made systems and then to do something about it. And that is important because Quran has laid down the highway of Sirat al-Mustaqim very clearly in front of us. At the very least, be aware of the pitfalls of the system so that when trouble arrives, you will then know to expect it and will also understand the cause behind it, i.e. the worst thing in life is to be caught unawares. So forewarned, and it prepares us for that by warning us in advance that you are living in a man-made system where there will be uncertainty and fear. 1784, we need to identify external and internal chains. Now the next verse is, Kul kullun yamalu ala shakilatihi fa rabbukum alamu biman huwa ahda sabila. What is stated above that, according to this very Quran, the paths of prosperities become opened up to one party and destruction descends on the other party. From this, it should not be taken that all this happens to them according to taqdeer over which they have no control. Not at all. Allah has defined an arena for human endeavor and action and has set free every human being into it by making him possessor of choice. And in this open arena, a moment does not impose any limit on himself other than those limits which the divine laws have defined. And this is what the belief of taqdeer does. Human beings self-impose some of restrictions on themselves, and as a result, they suffer. But other people chain their feet in 1,000 kinds of self-imposed knots. And we have seen it that if we do not have Allah as a model, that is, we haven't accepted the Iman of the Quran, then our mind becomes a board for all kinds of beliefs. It is obvious now that each and every individual can only be as far as that limit to which his tether permits him. In this way, Mu'mineen advance forward in this arena of endeavor and action because their feet are not chained, and the rejectors are left behind because they are shackled in their self-imposed chains. In this way, every human being acts according to his own disposition in the domain of his choice and reaches to his ultimate limit in it. But this does not mean that the action of everyone is correct and according to haqq. Because without the guidance of the Quran, we really cannot define our limits, that how far we can go in this physical life and how much development can take place or how many benefits we can accrue by being outside the guidance of the Quran. Because human self does not come into it. This knowledge is with Allah as to who is treading on the straightest path of all in life and how far he will go on this. The meaning of Allah having knowledge is that those people who function according to the laws of Allah are the ones on the straight path of life. Shakila over here is translated as tether, and I will explain that in following slides. Further reflections. Continuing from the previous verse, here the Quran has expanded this further. Let us first look at the commonplace translation, say, each acts according to his own disposition, but your Rabb knows best who it is that is best guided on the way. Can we see the absence of any connection between the two parts of this translation? We can cast another glance on the meaning noted regarding the verse. So if we go with these translations, then we can't make any head and tail out of it, because it is saying that everyone acts according to his disposition, and only Allah knows as Rabb that who is best guided. Then that means that then this also supports that concept of takdir, that people, by reading these verses, put all responsibility on Allah, that He has made our qismat like that. That is why we are like that. And that is why when people suffer losses within man-made system, that it is from Allah. The Quran here points to two spheres of human life which have totally disparate outlooks. One is an animalistic level of existence where whatever is earned and achieved is finite and will end with physical death. The question of human self-development does not even arise in this kind of mechanistic concept of life. Next point is the second sphere to which our attention is drawn in this verse is related to the domain of living life under the guidance of Rabb, and that is the second part of the verse, which relates to the development of the human self and its further growth. This is not a finite arena of life. Life acquires a higher eminence and lofty status here. Now over here, I tried to explain shakilatehi, which is used in the verse. Let us briefly analyze the first part of the verse, kullun yamalu ala shakilatehi. The root of the word shakilatehi is from this root, shakal. Similar, and it means it has number of meanings, similar, alike, plural is ashkal, which means different matters and needs. For further application, see Lugatul Quran. Most meanings in this word are derived from similarity and likeness. For example, when one leg of an animal is secured to a similar leg, i.e. something used to tie together. There is a lot in Lugatul Quran, but I have kept my focus in relevance to this particular verse. The rope with which the camel's seat ends are tied also derives from this root. Al-shikal is that rope by which the fore and hind legs of an animal are tied so that it can only walk to the extent that this rope permits. So what Quran is saying is that we tie a rope around our own legs and then tie it with another tree. That is, we confine ourselves and put limits to our own disposition. From shakil is the feminine shakila, and that is used in this verse. This is related to Arabic grammar. Used in this verse, which means the state of tying together. In order to understand its meaning, we need to look at this fact that everything in the universe possesses certain potentialities. In the seed of a mango, there is the potential for it to become a mango tree, which will bear sweet and fragranced fruit like the mango. The destination of a mango seed is to bear the mango fruit. It cannot go beyond this defined limit, which is kept within it by design. The same applies for other things of the universe. Explaining this aspect further, this essentially means that everything can reach its shakil and cannot go beyond it. Whatever nature has defined for it as a destination or objective, it cannot go further than this limit. So all those inanimate and other living animals who do not possess choice and intent, they have a certain limit defined by nature. We can say defined by Allah as Rabb. But in the case of man, the situation is different. As far as man is concerned, there is undoubtedly also a limit to his potentials, but the present stage of his life is not his ultimate limit. And that is an important point, that if we think that our life will end with death, then the rope which we have tied around our leg, it has a very limited length, and we cannot go outside that because we have assumed that the life will end with death. This is an important point to understand from this verse. And we can see the practical evidence of that around us. He can go beyond this too. And Quran says, Aktaris samawati wal arde. This is given in Surah Rahman, and we can look at the rest of the verse as well. However, inherited, that is, we can go beyond the limits of heavens and earth. And that is the whole purpose of giving us life, that is creating human beings, that they can go beyond the limits defined by their physical self. However, inherited influences, initial environment, training, education, emotive proclivities, etc., are those ropes due to which his feet become tight. But a righteous society can create vastness in these ropes. So we can see that how limited length is of the rope within the man-made system, and how much confined human beings are to their material existence. The Quran shapes such a society in which the latent potentials of every individual become fully developed. The limits which are established in this society are those which are there in reality to create an expanse in his abilities. And this is why the Quran says this is what is meant by La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wusaha. And people take a wrong meanings of this as well when they say that when the trouble comes on them and they say that this is from Allah and this is the capacity we have to bear these losses, which has nothing to do with that, because this is related to human self within the permanent values that human beings have latent potentials and we can expand the domain of our capabilities as we live our life by using the permanent values. All that is in the Quran is there to provide opportunities to expand the human sphere of abilities in direct proportion to human efforts. Next is, in the Quranic society, responsibility will be given according to the shakila of each individual, and efforts will also be made that their sphere of operation should keep expanding further. I think this line sums it up quite well. Sharing and accept. With suitable development, the human child can go far ahead of his forefathers. Historically, we witness that the man of today is collectively far ahead of former generations. In the same way, human beings of coming generations can be far ahead of the present generation. With the progress in knowledge and consciousness, the sphere of human potentialities keeps expanding, and with it, his responsibilities also keep increasing. It should be made clear that what is meant by these potentialities relates to the human self and which are present in every person. It should be borne in mind that there is definitely a limit to human choices. For example, he can stand on one foot at a time but cannot remain standing with both feet lifted up at the same time. But this is in a physical domain. But the extent to which man is provided with choice and intent, in that he enjoys total freedom. No one interferes in this choice and intent of his. And we can see that in the world around us, that the world which we see around us is based on what human beings have chosen to and how their intellect has thought about creating this world. This is taken from Lugatul Quran. Few more comments. We can bring the two parts of the verse together and understand that the Quran here has supported the first part by concluding, فَرَبُّكُمْ عَلَمُ بِمَنْ هُوَ أَهْدَى سُبِيلًا. It is through the comprehension of the Quran and its value system that you will know whether you are on the path of Allah or not. It is not possible to be rightly guided in your own mind. It has to be checked by using the criteria laid down by Allah as Rabb. And this happens in the world of religion, that people think that by carrying out those rituals in their own mind, they think that they are now qualified for a paradise in the hereafter. They don't think of creating a paradise in this world. They don't see problems in this world, but they are more worried about their own salvation. Quran removes that doubt and that kind of false assumptions or self-deception. It clearly says that you should check yourself against the criteria which is laid down in the Quran. This aspect is noted in another verse, فَلَا تَزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Hence justify not yourselves, he knows best who is muttaqi. And this makes it very clear, because Quran right at the beginning says, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book guides those who wish to become muttaqi. And then muttaqi is defined throughout, and first stage of that is to acquire iman. Become a muttaqi using the Quran, then you will know exactly what it means to have a developed self. So there is no doubt left in that. Quran convinces us through the external evidence of its criteria that our self is developing. And if it is not developing, we will also know it, because such a self will have weaknesses and limitations which are also spelled out in the Quran very clearly. This also means that we cannot live our life here under the darkness of our batil beliefs, yet somehow expect that suddenly paradise will appear before us after death. People live under all kinds of self-created illusions in this life without the light of the Quran. It is their choice whether to live under darknesses or live under the light offered by the Quran. And we can check their illusions as well. And if by using the Quranic light, and if you discuss with them, you will very quickly know, even those who claim to read the Quran frequently and try to give their own meanings, they also do not have that developed self to which the Quran is pointing our attention to. Now, some examples of tethering, external and internal. Over here, what I've done is I put some pictures together with some comments. Over here, we can see this tether, that is, this chain is tied to this tree, and a dog can only go up to the extent to which that chain allows it. Over here, an elephant's leg is tied to a chain. And this is another chain which human beings have created by keeping people poor. And even these people who are in these backward areas and in these slums, they are also human beings like those who are rich and powerful, and they are not willing to give them those facilities which are available to them and even to their pets. The chains created by man-made systems which cripple humanity, and we can see plenty of it in today's world. Now, this is another kind of chains. Physical and cognitive chains come in all kinds of colors and forms. Man raises structures to justify his chains and forgets the needs of his self. We can see the superstructure over here, and these structures we can see in everywhere in the world. And this is another one, religion, organized path of collective suicide. If we use the Quranic criteria, people following this kind of a path do not have any hereafter. It's just they're wasting their time, and nothing changes in the outer world. Physical and intellectual chains imposed by the power structures in the world, Pharaoh as Rab. And this is another picture I have taken. The heaviest chain is to live life believing it will end with physical death. And this is the ultimate chain which we put around our neck, human beings thinking that there is no life beyond death. As a result, they never ever get anywhere near the higher purpose of life. And over here, I've quoted a verse which I haven't put down the meanings. We can look at any translations. It's fairly straightforward, except for a small metaphorical part of it. Inna Firauna ala fil arde, that is, Firaun had elevated himself in the earth because he thought that he's going to live forever. Wajala alaha shiyan yastazifu taifatan. What he used to do was that people under his control, he used to push them down. He used to make them weak. Taifatum minhum yuzabbihu abnahum wa yastahi nisahum. And metaphorically over here, Quran says is that out of them, whoever had some human qualities, he used to slaughter them, kill them, or keep them backward, not to allow them to come forward. And those who were weak and sycophants, he used to bring them forward. Innahu kana minal mufsidin. And in this way, he created chaos, conflict, and imbalance in the world, under his domain. And we can see this happening in our world of 2024. Understanding Ruh. Now, this is our next verse, 1785. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. They ask you what is the reality and form of Wahi. Say to them that Wahi is related to the Amr of Allah, not to be perceived universe. And since your knowledge is confined to the perceived universe, hence you cannot comprehend the form of the realities related to the domain of Amr. This means that other than a Nabi, no one can understand this matter, how Wahi descends and what its form and reality is. But the teaching provided via Wahi, the Quran, can be understood by everyone. root of ruh. This is the root of ruh, blowing of wind, arrival of wind, feeling of the wind. Since wind points to movement and strength, hence this meaning is included in its derivatives, something which produces movement, which is dynamic. It also means vastness, expanse, and generosity. So it has another aspect of it as well. Comfort, happiness, rahmat, bliss are also related to it. So all these three meanings we can relate to this root. Al-Ri means victory, supremacy, and power, revolution, etc. So that is another dimension added to it. Muhit has noted meanings of Al-Ru as happiness and pleasure, justice and fairness, comfort and nourishment, due to which the supplicant achieves comfort and peace. The meaning of Ar-Ruh are noted as Rahmat, Wahi from Allah, and the Quran itself. So this is the aspect which is related to the Quran. And we can look at Lugatul Quran for more of these aspects. Also human ruh. From Wahi, this points to divine energy, which when it is received by man becomes a cause for choice and intent, and the human sense of identity appears in the form of I. And this is the beauty of it, that this is the ruh which is giving us this I. Let us look at some verses to see the context in which this has appeared in the Quran. What I've done over here is I've quoted some verses. There are more verses as well, and we can look at it in our own time. Verse 16:2, Nazzilul malaikata birruhi min amrihi. He does send down his malaika, and malaika we know are internal and external forces of nature which are there to help man to progress further. With a ruh of his command, that is Amr. Some more related verses. Over here, Quran says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِّنْ أَمْرِنَا. Thus have we by our Amr sent Wahi, that is our ruh, to you. Then in another verse, وَأَتَيْنَا إِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ الْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِالرُّوحِ الْقُدُسِ. We gave Isa, peace be upon him, the son of Maryam, clear signs and strengthened him with Ruhul Qudus. Some translate it as Holy Spirit. Some take the meanings as Jibreel, that is this Ruhul Qudus, they take the meanings of Jibreel from that is as the angel who communicated Wahi in the above verse, and taken the same meaning of the verse, Nazala bir Ruhul Amin. And they also say Ruhul Amin means also Jibreel. But as we will go through it, we will see that the connotation in relation to our self-development, we can very easily understand without going into these details. With it descended the Ruhul Amin ala kalbika, that is on your heart. Now another verse is Kul nazzalahu ruhul qudse min rabbika bil haqqi li yusabbit allazina amanu wa hudam wa bushra lil muslimin. We had a presentation on this. It is worth looking at that as well, because some aspects were covered there as well. Say, Ruhul Qudus has brought down the revelation from your Rabb with haqq to provide strength to the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen as a guide and glad tidings to Muslimin. So itself, Quran has made it clear what Ruhul Qudus means. It is that kind of energy, that kind of guidance, which is guidance and glad tidings for Muslimin and for those who have Iman. Another verse, Tanazzalul malaikatu wa ruhu fiha bi'izni rabbihim min kulli amrin. Very famous verse in relation to Laylatul Qadr. And Layla means night, and Al-Qadr means that is the scales which are related to the changes we want to bring within human world through the system of deen. And we can narrow it down as well as expand it by looking at the root of this word Qadr. And this is also explained in the book of Destiny as well in detail. The whole Taqdeer is a derivative of this root. Therein come down the Malaika and Ruh by the law of Rabb for all matters. The Quran helps to deal with the dark era faced by humanity. So over here, if we relate this Malaika and Ruh to the dark era in which Quran was revealed, then we can come to some conclusion that it is related to changing the human system and replacing it with the system of deen. Now continuing, In relation to the creation of man possessing choice and intent, the Quran says, Summa savvahu wa nafakha fihi min ruhihi wa ja'alakum as-sama wal absara wal afidata qalilan ma tashkurun. There is a lot in this verse. Here the meaning of wa nafakha fihi min ruhihi is that divine energy which is breathed into man, which makes him different from the animals, and he becomes a responsible individual possessing choice and intent. In relation to verse 1784, though it is related to Wahi in the Quran, here too, within us, for example, the source of our I, we do not know much about it except that all human consciousness and awareness is owed to this Ruh. We don't know that how this, because we cannot see Ruh within us, and the conundrum of consciousness is widespread in the world of philosophy. They are trying to still figure out what human consciousness is and from where it originates. Some think it comes from our nervous system, our brain, and some think that it is not from the brain because it is invisible and they haven't been able to figure it out. And only Quran can provide them the answer to it. And this is a great trump card in our hands where we can draw others' attention and explain to them that, look, Quran has explained it very well, which areas we can understand and which areas are beyond our reach. So consciousness we can understand because it is through this consciousness that I'm presenting these slides to everyone. We cannot see it but know it exists, and the glaring evidence of its manifestation is through all that man has created in the world, even without the guidance of the Quran. The day he starts taking advantage of the way he preserved in the Quran, the Ruh within him will manifest its higher eminence through the system of Deen. And we have seen it that through this work which we are doing on this platform and trying to come to grips with the system of Deen, how much self-development has taken place in terms of understanding the Quran and the finer aspects of our own psyche. And once the system is in place, then we will see the true demonstration of this Ruh within us and the Ruh through which the Quran has been revealed. The human self or nafs owes its existence to this Ruh breathed into it at the time of birth, where it becomes a different creation. And if you remember, this is another verse, Summa anshanahu khalqan akhara. This is at the end of the creation of a human child within the mother's womb. And then Quran says that we took out another creation from that. And then Quran says, Tabarakallahu asan al-khaliqeen, that this creation of ours, which has got divine energy, will also become a creator and becomes worthy of being addressed as you ja'ala lakum. And over here we can see that after Quran says that this Ruh was infused in him, and then is the third person over here, and then it addresses it as Wajala lakum, you. So with this Ruh, he has become you, who is worthy of being addressed and made responsible with choice and intent. And as a result of that, Sama wal absara wal afedata, he becomes an intellectual being, a rational thinking being. And then Quran says, Qalilam ma tashkarun, that you people, if you do not think on these lines, you do not pay attention to the Quran, then you will not be able to bring out your best in this life. Expanding this verse a bit further, another point of interest which comes to mind is that man gets his choice and intent through this Ruh infused by Allah, and this is in a raw form. And we know it because before we came to the Quran, we were very raw. And once we have come to the Quran, we are maturing. Our vastness is increasing. Our consciousness is expanding. For this I emanating from this Ruh needs another Ruh in the form of the Wahi of Allah to meet the needs of the development of this self and to bring out all its latent potentials by using the complete Quran. And this is an important point which I discussed with our other members like Brother Asif Jaleel and Brother Muhammad Ali and a few others. The Quran is a fully developed and complete guidance to help develop this human self. The divine energy within us is raw. We get it raw. And now we have to develop it. And for that, what Allah has done is that He has given the source of that development, the complete source of that development in the form of the Quran. And this is a great blessing if we only understand the Quran. And then we will know what it means. This essentially means that the Quran is the means to serve the needs of all those latent potentials and their manifestation, which await the decision of our eye to feed it with its value system with a view to creating a new self and then applying it to the outer world. And from here, we can also understand the purpose of our creation, that how supreme this purpose is and what kind of a human being Quran wants us to become. Hasan al-Taqweem, that comes out of it. Hence, when the two ruh become compatible, i.e. become mu'min and muttaqi through the Quran, and then such selves come together, then the system of deen's demand is fulfilled and the system will start to take shape. A lot there to think around. Towards the end, by stating, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, the Quran has invited us to reflect on the part related to the application of this ruh and not on its origin, form, or shape and its visibility. And if we remember that Bani Israel had asked Messenger Moses that we would like to look at Allah, and what answer came from the Quran. So over here nowadays, we don't have to ask for that because our rational side has developed to that high level that we can understand through the signs around us and through the Quran itself that Allah exists. And this whole book is not the product of human intellect, and it is for our own self-development. Each one of us knows that we exist, and we also know that for self-development, we need the Quran. Now we need to work on this to get the system of deen in place to relieve mankind from fear and huzn. The acquisition of this knowledge is placed within our reach. Now over here I've drawn a schematic linking ruh within man and ruh leading to Wahi, need for self-development. And these are typical couple possessing ruh. Child also possesses ruh, and both husband and wife possess ruh. Biological, they are biological, and plus they have raw self, which is not developed. Possess ruh, which gives I, possessing choice plus intent because of this ruh, and because of this I, raw self, which needs Wahi for guidance and for self-development. Choice of kufr or iman. So they have a choice whether to follow the path of kufr or of iman. Choose kufr, just follow majority and man-made systems. If they make a choice for kufr, that is, they don't have to do much. They just accrue the physical benefits of life, fine, and live their life, and that is the end of it. Reap the benefits of man-made systems despite possessing I, that is, which is based on this ruh, divine energy, and not developing self through choice. I hope we can make others understand by coming to grips with this. This needs a bit of pause and reflection on our part, that what it means. It means no life in the hereafter. It means no developed self. And all our efforts in this life will become wasted. And Quran calls it ahbitat amaluhum. Ruh, highly developed, appears as Wahi, that is the Quran. If dissatisfied with man-made systems and looking for guidance, then accept Iman and do solid deeds, be part of a collective effort towards Deen. And what I've done is that if we take this away, if we take this option away, then we live life without a choice. And that is an important point. What is the point of giving choice and intent to these three beings if they are not going to use this choice, and they are not even aware of this choice, and those who are aware of this choice do not pass it on to them? And that is the important point which should come out of this schematic. Now, next verse, 1786, the Quran is for all times complete, preserved, protected, and retaining its full potency as guide, because it is based on that developed ruh, through which Allah has sent this Wahi to the messenger, and now it is preserved and with us. وَلَا إِنْ شِئْنَا لَا نَذْهَبَنَّ بِالَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ ثُمَّ لَا تَجِدُ لَكَ بِهِ عَلَيْنَا وَكِيلًا. The proof of this reality that the fountainhead of Wahi is beyond the perceived universe is that Wahi is not the product of the intellect of a Nabi himself, nor does he have any control and authority over it. Hence, whatever we have sent down on this messenger, if we take it away, then there is no such power which can lay a claim on us or can question us. This is another matter that our decision is that no matter should be taken away from this Wahi, rather should be kept preserved. An important verse, and we will see some aspects of it. Now, over here, I've quoted from Islam, a challenge to religion and accept. As we have seen, man possesses a real self too, and we have only imperfect and fragmentary knowledge of this self. We cannot comprehend the real self as it transcends human reason. The nature of the real self is unknown to us. And this is a fact, we do not know about that. But through the Quran, we know far lot now, for example, on this platform than what others know. It may even be impossible to know. We catch fleeting glimpses of it in value experience and the consciousness of moral effort. A very important line over here written by Allama Pervez, we catch fleeting glimpses of it in value experience and in the consciousness of moral effort. Whenever human beings, even those who are not guided by the Quran and do good in the world, they experience the presence of that self within them. They have a glimpse of it. All that we can say about it with certainty is that it is free, that it possesses unlimited capacity for development, and that the urge to self-expression and self-development is inherent in it. Another very important line, we can figure it out. By following this path, we can now, in fact, figure it out that we are developing. Our consciousness is expanding with every presentation which we share because new aspects come before us. We feel in our bones that a grand destiny awaits the self in us, which constitutes the core of our being. Even at these initial stages of our development, we can see, we can feel that what is happening to ourself and how it is developing and how it is expanding. And by coming together, we can see the results of it, some signs of it. So it is not otherworldly, it is very much about this life right here in this world. All we can say is that we can attain the goal provided we live in accord with the eternal verities. These verities are hidden from our view and transcend our reason. Verities over here means principles and values, and this refers to permanent values. We have to be content with the tantalizing glimpses we catch of them. No wonder that our reason, groping in the dark, longs for the light which would illuminate the furthermost reaches of life. And the comment over here means that at some stage in our life, we do wonder that what is the purpose of my life? Other day, I shared one presentation in another group, and I can share in seminar group as well, where there is Dr. Stephen Meyer, I think he's written a book on God's hypothesis or something like that, and he made a very pertinent comment towards the end of that interview. This light is vouchsafed to us in the revelation which has its source in Allah, who in the words of the Quran is the light of earth and heavens. Few more reflections. Another interesting issue is mentioned in this verse where Allah appears to have stated that He could take away that which is revealed to the messenger as Wahi. Why should this be taken away? And that is the question which comes to our mind. Obviously, this is not the case that Allah wishes to take this away. It is His law, and Allah's laws don't change. He wants to provide guidance to mankind, and He has selected a messenger, and it will come through that. That means there is a more to this verse than what it appears to be through, for example, translations. It is more to confirm that it will not be taken away, therefore do not have any doubt in this regard, unless we want to take it away. And that is what we are doing, that by reading the Quran, still we don't get it. Another point of interest for us is that it is completed and not going to be taken away. However, we may shut its doors on our hearts and minds by our own self. And in this way, we will not benefit from this guidance, which is the need of ourself. Next is, then the verse concludes by stating, Elaika summa la tajidu laka bihi alayna wakila. The source of this Wahi is Allah Himself, and for its continuation only He can be approached. There is an interesting finer point here where the messenger and his companions is assured that firstly, this message is not going to be interrupted as it has become your need. And secondly, Allah is fully aware of its importance to you and your efforts. Rububiyat leading to Rahmat and Fadl. And this is the last verse of today's presentation. Illa rahmatam min rabbika inna fadlahu kana alayka kabira. This is one aspect of the rahmat and rububiyat of Allah through which Wahi is bestowed, and this is a supreme fadl of Allah on you, O Messenger, that He has selected you for this supreme favor. This cannot be acquired through the effort or skill and action of someone. Finally, few more comments. Continuing from the previous verse, here it is elaborated that this Wahi is part of the rahmat of Allah, that is for human self-development, both in the physical sense, that is meeting all the needs, and also of the needs of the human self. And it is also part of his attribute of rububiyat, that this revelation of the Quran will continue so that those who have an interest in the divine guidance can benefit from it. These two attributes of rahmat and rububiyat cannot be comprehended superficially. And that is why Quran again and again says, pause and reflect, think through it, but require deep and intense reflection. Firstly, to acquire these as attributes and then to implement these practically within society in order to grasp their importance in relation to self-development. Once this practical aspect materializes, then you will appreciate the fadl. And fadl, if we look at this root, one of the meanings is that there has to be an abundance of good. And it is opposite of paucity or scarcity side of it. And it is applicable to both the physical needs as well as to the aspects of human cognitive development. And then the verse concludes by stating, Inna fadlahu kana alayka kabira. And we can see that the superlative degree of the kabira is used over here, that it is supreme, the maximum. And Quran hasn't defined the maximum because this will keep multiplying even in the life of the hereafter. This is not an ordinary favor on you, but a supreme blessing. By indicating this superlative degree of fadl, the Quran has invited us to put in efforts intellectually as well as by following this path to prove to our own selves that this is indeed a fact. With that, we come to the end. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you.